Bună dimineața!
Bună dimineața!
Bună dimineața, stimați participanți! Bine ați venit la cea de-a 14-a ediție a conferinței internaționale Patrimoniul cultural, cercetare, valorificare, promovare. Pentru oaspeții noștri specificatari, am să spun și câteva cuvinte în limba engleză. Good morning, dear participants. Welcome to the 14th edition of the International Conference Cultural Heritage Research Valorization Promotion. Anul acesta, la conferință s-au înregistrat circa 90 de cercetători din 6 țări. Comunicările sunt foarte interesante și reprezintă rezultatele ultimelor cercetări. Vă mulțumim mult pentru participare. This year, about 90 researchers from 6 countries attended the conference. The papers are very interesting and represent the result of the latest research. Thank you a lot for participating. Pentru deschiderea lucrărilor conferinței, oferim cuvântul directorului Institutului Patrimoniului Cultural, domnului dr. habilitat Victor Ghilaș. For the opening of the conference, we offer the floor to the director of the Institute of Cultural Heritage, dr. habilitat Victor Ghilaș.
Bună dimineața! Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests. We meet today at the 14th edition of the Scientific Conference of International Status, Culture, Heritage, Research, Valorization, Promotion, organized within the project The Identity Dimension on the Art in the Republic of Moldova as an active factor of substantial development of society in the context of the European Intercultural Dialogue. Fără a exagera, putem afirma că manifestarea desfășurată sub genericul anunțat confirmă consolidarea unei tradiții. Edițiile precedente și-au câștigat meritul de a fi profitat o imagine pozitivă a potențialului nostru științific, bineînțeles, întâi de toate în domeniul cercetării culturii spirituale, iar pe un plan mai general în domeniul umanistic. Am o deosebită plăcere să vă salut astăzi la ședința de inaugurare a lucrărilor conferinței, care își propune să devină un catalizator al cercetării artelor, etnologiei și culturii. Evenimentul este conceput drept forum pentru a asigura un schimb deschis de opinii și experiențe într-o asigurare unei mai bune cunoașteri a domeniului de care ne ocupăm. Totodată, conferința de astăzi, la care participă reprezentanți din Republica Moldova, Georgia, România, Turcia și Ucraina, constituie o bună oportunitate de a discuta provocările ce țin de valorificarea prin cercetare a patrimoniului artistic și etnocultural în beneficiul societății, de abordare a modalităților de promovare prin intermediul discursului științific și de soluționare a problemelor care acest patrimoniu se confruntă. Îmi exprim încrederea că lucrările manifestării noastre fac parte din această necesară și actuală grilă tematică. Ori, în opinia noastră, orice contribuție în serviciul înțelegerii rolului pe care patrimoniul cultural îl reprezintă în viața contemporană poate aduce schimbări radicale în gândirea și în modul de a-l percepe, de a-l valorifica științific, de a-l salvgarda și promova sub orice formă. Aș dori să menționez câteva dintre semnificațiile conferinței, semnificații de o încărcătură ideatică deosebită. Faptul că ni s-au alăturat în calitate de parteneri, unindu-ne forțele, Academia de Muzică, Teatru și Arte Plastice din Chișinău, Muzeul Național de Etnografie și Istorie Naturală din Chișinău, Biblioteca municipală Bogdan Petricei cu HD, filiala de arte Tudor Arghezi, Institutul Studiul Artelor, Etnografie și Folclor Maxim Rylski din Kiev, Ukraina, Universitatea de Teatru și Film și Rustaveli din Tbilisi, Georgia, pentru a organiza acest eveniment științific, dă expresie și valoare aparte, face dovada un înalt nivel și nu doar al unei colaborări instituționale, ci și a legăturii organice dintre știința academică, universitară și cea muzeală. Ținem mult la această colaborare, o prețuim și vom persevera pentru a-i asigura continuitate. Următoarea semnificație, derivata primei, vizează modalitatea de promovare a rezultatelor actului de cercetare științifică. În acest sens, prezența colegilor din țară și de peste hotare la întrunirea de astăzi relevă nu numai continuitatea unor demersuri științifice, ci și solidaritatea, forța comunității profesionale de care aparținem, ea reprezentând valoarea însumată a individualităților acesteia. O altă semnificație decurge din diversitate tematice abordate, puse sub semnul celor trei elemente: cercetare, valorificare, promovare. Mutual în demersurile științifice. Împreună putem demonstra odată în plus capacitatea creativă a fiecăruia și a tuturor celor prezenți. Este convingerea noastră și cu siguranță a dumneavoastră, stimați colegi. Vă mulțumesc!
Vă mulțumim, domnule director, pentru deschiderea conferinței. Pentru a ne saluta și a ne susține în cadrul acestei conferințe, mi s-a alăturat membrul corespondent și vicepreședintele Academiei de Științe a Moldovei, domnul Victor Moralu. In order to greet and support us in this conference, the corresponding member and Vice President of Academy of Science of Moldova, Mr. Victor Moralu, joined us. Mr. Vice President, we give you the floor. Vă rugăm, domnule vicepreședinte.
Da, mulțumesc, dragi prieteni, dați-mi voie să vă salut și să-mi exprim satisfacție pentru faptul organizării acestui important for și totodată să-mi exprim propria satisfacție de participare în cadrul lui. Vreau să vă transmit, așa cum este de acum tradițional, mesajul de salut al Academiei de Științe a Moldovei, a președintelui Academiei Academician Tighineanu, și consider că e firesc să fie un astfel de mesaj de salut din partea Academiei de Științe, pentru că este firesc să vă transmit că noi continuăm să considerăm Institutul Patrimoniul Cultural, organizatorul principal al acestei conferințe, în calitate de instituție academică. Cu atât mai mult că este instituție de cercetare, lider în domeniu și are în permanență în vizor căutarea unor noi oportunități pentru mobilizarea comunității științifice, pentru abordarea consecventă a problemelor sferei spirituale, pentru promovarea patrimoniului cultural, pentru fortificarea deschiderii cercetătorilor, pentru descoperirea noilor orizonturi ale științei. Respectiv, lansarea ediției de azi a conferinței, a 14-a la rând, confirmă vocația europeană a științei autohtone, aspirația ei de a se simți parte a civilizației europene. Studiul Patrimoniului, un domeniu atât de frumos și relevant pentru marca identitară a unui neam, oferă posibilități multiple pentru promovarea valorilor naționale, înscrierea lor în contextul mai amplu al spațiului european de cercetare. Tocmai acest lucru sper să fie relievat pe parcursul discuțiilor, fiind accentuat de specialiștii notori în domeniul studiului patrimoniului cultural, participanții ai forului, reprezentând nu doar Republica Moldova, dar și comunitatea științifică internațională. Ar fi de remarcat câteva din prioritățile conferinței, așa cum le înțelegem din acest program și din rezumatele publicate, printre care colaborarea. Colaborarea poate și trebuie să fie consolidată inclusiv prin organizarea unor astfel de manifestări științifice care pun în valoare rezultatele științifice. contribuie la diagnosticarea stării științei în domeniu și alinierea ei la standardele consacrate. Necesitatea perpetuării experienței acumulate prin edițiile ulterioare pentru a asigura și a dezvolta o platformă de dezbatere vizând problemele eficientizării studiului actual al patrimoniului cultural. Edificarea în continuare a dialogului științific, foarte important în circumstanțele complexe care determină viața societății contemporane, stabilirea și dezvoltarea relațiilor de colaborare în domeniu, valorificarea potențialului științific, dezvăluirea noi fațete ale eforturilor depuse de specialiști în domeniu, care obține valoare nu doar prin rapoartele și comunicările științifice prezentate, dar și prin spiritul discuțiilor constructive, schimb benefic de opinii, relevarea noilor interpretări, stimulând dezvăluirea și percepția esențelor, refuzând aparențele, fundamentând reperele abordării științifice a patrimoniului ca bază pentru formarea și educarea axiologică a societății, fortificarea valorilor general umane. Felicitări, domn director, felicitări participanților la această conferință. Vă dorim succes în continuare. Mulțumesc!
Vă mulțumim, domnule vicepreședinte, pentru parteneriat, pentru că ne sunteți alături și ne sprijiniți. Unul dintre partenerii permanenți ai Institutului Patrimoniului Cultural este Academia de Muzică, Teatru și Arte Plastice. Astăzi, alături de noi, este doamna rector, dr. Victoria Melnic. Stimată doamnă rector, vă oferim cuvântul. One of the permanent partners of the Institute of Cultural Heritage is the Academy of Music, Theatre and Fine Arts. Today with us is the rector, Dr. Victoria Melnic. Mr. Rector, we give you the floor.
Stimați colegi, mulțumesc. Eu am pus pe chat în limba engleză ceea ce am să spun în română, așa că invit colegii din alte țări să ne fie alături. Bine ați venit în Moldova, dragi colegi, fie chiar și virtual. Mă bucur că Academia noastră a devenit un partener permanent al conferinței organizate de Institutul Patrimoniului Cultural. Conferința din acest an reflectă o largă panoramă de teme, de preocupări științifice ale cercetătorilor din cele 6 țări, cercetători ce reprezintă diferite instituții, atât de cercetare cât și instituții de învățământ superior, toate însă fiind axate pe problemele studierii, valorificării și promovării patrimoniului cultural. De la folclor la jazz, de la arhitectura și frescile bisericilor vechi și cântarea de strană până la arhiva de cinematografie și creația componistică de ultimă oră, de la etnografie la arhitectură. Va fi abordată și problema dialogului cultural. De fapt, conferința noastră fiind ea însăși un exercițiu de dialog cultural științific, ce pune în valoare diverse aspecte ale spiritualității materializate în creația artistică și moștenire culturală. În mod deosebit aș vrea să-i salut pe colegii din Ucraina, care în aceste timpuri foarte dificile pentru țara lor, totuși ni s-au alăturat. Vă doresc tuturor mult succes, dragi colegi, și sper că aceste 2 zile petrecute împreună o să ne aducă tuturor clipe de revelație și vor contribui la stabilirea unor noi legături profesionale și, de ce nu, personale. Mulțumesc pentru atenție.
Vă mulțumim, doamnă rector, pentru parteneriat și sprijinul conferinței noastre. Următoarea etapă a conferinței sunt comunicările în plen. Pentru fiecare prezentare avem alocate câte 20 de minute. The next stage of the conference is plenary communications. We have 20 minutes for each presentation. Prima comunicare va fi prezentată de doamna Victoria Tkachenko, doctor în Studiul Artelor, profesor universitar, Academia de Muzică, Teatru și Arte Plastice. The first paper will be presented by Victoria Tkachenko, PhD, University Professor, Academy of Music, Theatre and Fine Arts, with presentation Moldovan popular music under the influence and the national folklore, diachronic and synchronic aspects.
Da, da. Imediat.
So, dear colleagues, good morning. I'm really sorry for my terrible voice. I hope it will survive until the end of presentation. The topic of my communication is Moldovan popular and to demonstrate the universal character of this trend, which cover different genres, different forms of non-academic music during a quite long period of its existence. And some examples of pop music, rock music, and jazz will be analyzed shortly. I chose the chronological period which cover last 50 years, starting with the end of 1970s and finishing with the contemporary epoch, 2020. And so we can talk about three examples. The famous vocal instrumental ensemble of the Soviet epoch named Horizon, and their hit named Morishka, in 1977. The popular Moldovan rock group Zdobshizdup, whose song and video clip Hey Tura has been created in 1999. And the ethno jazz group Trigon, a piece is named Implicit Launchpe, played on 11, recorded 2 years ago. As you probably know, Horizon was a really famous group of the Soviet epoch, founded in 1976 under the leadership of Oleg Milstein, while the group style is a fusion of rock, pop, funk, soul, and national folklore. All musicians, it's very important to stress, had a solid and fundamental academical background, a perfect sense of musical taste, while implementation of varied instruments, vocal resources like female and male voices, keyboard, guitar, percussion, trumpet, trombone, saxophone, and the folk instruments, violin and pan flute, allowed them to realize many innovative cultural and musical ideas. For instance, in the composition of the film Moldavian Melodies, the first composition from this movie, musicians use quotes from Hora Primăverii of the famous orchestra Fluiraș led by Sergei Lunkevich, and perfectly perform this fragment on violins by a group. This is just a group of singers. You can imagine the level of the musical development. While Chokerli, insert in this composition, is performed by another member of the group on the pan flute. While the accompaniment is reconstructing the dulcimer accompaniment typical for folk performance. Another famous song is La Morishka, which also demonstrates the most advanced method of a fusion of national folklore with folk music and jazz. For instance, the instrumental introduction exposes a pure jazz tool named Vamp. A bass line is realized in the funk style, enriched with electronic sounds typical for disco style of the end of the 70s, beginning of the 1980s. The brass instrument section playing also is used in the style of jazz rock. The folk melody is completed with original melodic lines, multi-vocal structures, non-typical for Moldovan folk tradition, while a song form is enriched with instrumental interludes, vocal improvisation, and so vocal scat as well, and call and response as jazz procedures. As the polymelodic structure of this composition, a relevant interaction of jazz idioms with popular music and folk, successfully transformed the folk source in a real hit of Moldovan and international pop music of its time. And now I would like to propose you a small fragment from this composition.
Amorișca cea din jos, să vă spun eu cea mai frumos. Eu eram cel mai frumos. Eu eram cel mai frumos. Națuliță corne coș, Bohemița pe de jos.
And how to come back to okay. Okay. Another famous Moldovan group which regards to the rock music is Dobshizdu, founded in 1994. The style of this rock group is a combination of hardcore, hip hop, punk, but also it's defined as ethno rock. And here on the screen, you can see some elements of the band style, like predilection for symmetrical constructions, perfectly blended with rhythmical structures of the folk origin. The vocal style, which is between the singing and recited in minor. The rhythmic potential which is highlighted in all means of musical expression. A leading role of folklore methods like ostinato pedals. And the timbre colors of popular instruments are used very wide, like pencil, trumpet, tilinka, accordion, different percussion instruments, combined with the sound standards of rock band. As for architectonics, individual mixed structures with the increased role of dancing fragments in the folk style are revealed. The influence of the compositional aspects of the folk suite also is studied or determined above verse chorus structure, very simple structure of rock music. And of course, we can find a lot of quotes of folk melodies like Pelenitsa and famous song Bunica Batidoba. I would like to show you a composition named Hey Tura. This is a unique example of the using of entire poetic text of folklore origin, winter carol song, within the rock composition. The vocal style is close to both to hip-hop rap recitation and to Hitura of Romanian cultural area, while the syncretic ritual is reconstructed within a rock song. And this idea is supported with the video concept of the piece. The sound of primitive instruments are used, aimed to create an authentic atmosphere. It's buhai and the cowbells as well.
Urându-le la toți sărbători.
Puțin și nominat, lângă voi v-a alăturat, și cuvântul mi-a ascultat, mâine anul se înnoiește, plugușorul se pornește, noi începem a ura, de la cap de a colinda, iar ne greau mătul mare, suntem nebune anulare, suntem nebune de belșug, pe sub brațe, pe sub plug, trage plugul mei plăcăi! Fenomenal, lângă voi v-a alăturat și cuvântul ne-a ascultat. Până anul se înnoiește, plugușorul se pornește, noi începem a ura, de la capea colinda, iar ne grea o măturbare, semn de bune anulare, semn de bune de belșug, pe sub brațe, pe sub plug, să urăm noi la pampan și la unul și la altul. Hai, frate, surgă-ne, bă, și strigați odată!
And the last example for today, Trigon Jazz Group, founded at the beginning of the 90s. It's a combo, 3 or 4 persons, it's varied, led by Anatol Stefanets, performer on brach, the folk kind of viola. And the authentic folklore performance actually within this group is integrated in the jazz texture. The musical language is characterized by high level of folklore patterns, skillful combined with jazz idioms, with postmodernistic quotation of melodies both of jazz and folklore origin. It's a very interesting example is combination of Chokerlie dedicated to birds with the Birdland, the famous composition of the jazz rock group Weather Report. As for composition logics, it's often based on the dynamic waves related to the growing of phonic tension, addition of new instruments and sounds, new layers. The method borrowed from archaic layers of Moldovan folklore like heterophonia, monody-exposition of melodies, ostinato, and pedals also are used. As a typical example of Trigon style is a piece named Impletit Launchpe, played at on 11, which is a good example in this context. Level of image of folk ritual and so on. And my final affirmation is the Moldovan popular music reveals an exceptional adherence to the principles of localization. This definition combines global and local, and means that musical genres and form of foreign and Western origin are assimilated, maintaining the national identity and unique character, which is based on the music psychology of Moldovan people. Thank you so much for the attention.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Tkachenko. Dear colleagues, if you have any question, you can ask them. Dacă aveți întrebări, puteți întreba.
No question. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Victoria. It's nice to see you after Sofia.
Me too. Me too.
And thank you for such interesting paper.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Tkachenko. Următorul vorbitor este doamna Ala Ceastena, doctor în Studiul Artelor, Institutul Patrimoniului Cultural, cu prezentarea Istoria gimnaziului al doilea masculin din Chișinău și a bisericii de casă, construită la sfârșitul secolului XIX și începutul secolului XX, cu ocazia împlinirii 120 de ani de la construirea bisericii. The next speaker is Mrs. Ala Chastina, PhD in Art Study from the Institute of Cultural Heritage, with the presentation The History of the Second Male Gymnasium in Chișinău and the House Church built with it in the end of the 19th-20th centuries for the 120th anniversary of the construction of the church.
Dear participants of the International Conference, this year, the 19th of May marked the 120th anniversary of the construction of the Biserica Schimbarea la Fața a Mântuitorului Church, which was originally built for the second male gymnasium in Chișinău. My report is connected with the history of these two buildings. The educational institution was opened in Chișinău in 1871 and was originally a 4-class gymnasium. In 1884, it was transformed into the second Chișinău Gymnasium, which was subordinate to the Ministry of Public Education of the Odessa Educational District. In 1886, Nikolai Alaev became the director of this gymnasium. As head, he devoted 17 years to this educational institution. During this period, the second male gymnasium became one of the most well-organized educational institutions, with a high level of cultural and moral upbringing and education. The National Archives of the Republic of Moldova keeps the documents on the construction of the Chișinău Second Male Gymnasium in 1892-1893. Plans and projects for the constructions of the building were drawn up. By the district architect Demosfen Mazirov. It's known that he was born in 1839 in Evpatoria and was the nephew of the famous artist Ivan Aivazovsky. In 1865, Demosfen Mazirov graduated from the Imperial Academy of Arts. From 1866, he began his work in Odessa. He was the architect of the Odessa Custom District. In 1870, he became the architect of the Odessa Educational District. In 1881-1882, Mazirov received the position of the architect of the Novorossiysk University. In 1881, he was a member of the jury for the selection of the project of the monument to Alexander Pushkin in Odessa. Mazirov is the author of the project of the second male Odessa gymnasium at the Staropurta-Frankovskaya Street in 1886. It was this architect who prepared the project of the main facade, side facade, and longitudinal sections, project of the basement, first, second floors, and cross section for the construction of the building of the second male gymnasium in Chișinău. Then these documents were sent to the construction department, which decided that the project was technically drawn up satisfactorily, and the estimate was in the amount of about 134,000 rubles. According to the archival documents, the second male gymnasium overlooking the main facade of the central Alexandrovskaya Street, today Stefan Kilmayer Boulevard, was built in 1895. The solution of the main facade facing the central street of Chisinau consisted of 3 protruding paths. The merchant Georgy Pronin, architects Karl Gaski, Grigory Lazinsky, Piotr Starzhinsky, Yakov Uskat, and others all took an active part in the construction. In August 1895, an estimate was already approved for the installation of a stone fence around the buildings of the second Chisinau Gymnasium in the amount about 7,000 rubles, compiled by Bessarabian provincial architect Lozinsky on August the 21st, 1895. In September, the junior lawyer manager Yakov Uskat submitted a revised estimate for the construction of the fence around the gymnasium's building, which was also approved by the construction department. In 1911, a special gym was added to the building. This happened under the director of the gymnasium, Yanko. It's known that on March 22nd, 1903, the director of the gymnasium sent to the construction department for approval a plan on 4 sheets with copies for the construction filed by the architect Mitrofan Eladi in amount about 25,000 rubles. On June 1911, the gym was started and completed by December the 1st of the same year. In principle, alone determined extension of the gymnasium in terms of its size, landscaping and equipment with necessary instruments of the best in the entire educational district. The cost of gym building exceeded 10,000 rubles. In the First World War, from the winter of 1916-1917, the gymnasium housed the military headquarters for the supply of the Southern Army. It was a time where pre-conscription training of students became mandatory. The so-called labor squads were organized from student volunteers who were supposed to help the families of motherland defenders, as well as participate in the harvest. During this difficult time, the director of gymnasium was Vasily Yurasov, who was ahead from 1914 to 1917, and he was replaced by Pavel Schumacher. From February 20 to December 4th, 1917, a surgical hospital was located in the building of the second gymnasium. During this time, classes were held in the second shift in the first male gymnasium and the women gymnasium named after Nagovskaya. On December 19, 1918, Alexander Oatov was appointed the director of the gymnasium and was supposed to restore the building after the military events of the 1914 and the Russian Revolution of 1917, where there was a hospital in the gymnasium. On October 9, 1919, a decree was adopted of the nationalization of the second gymnasium when the number of Romanian lessons was increased from 38 to 48 hours per week. Russian became optional. Later, Lyceum number 2 was renamed the Military Lyceum of the King Ferdinand I, Liceu Militar Regele Ferdinand I, as well as Mihai Viteazul. Most likely due to the fact that the building located on the main street was an administrative building of impressive size, it was decided to transfer it to the Central Committee of the party. In the photograph, where the building of the former gymnasium was not destroyed, you can also see the sports field of this educational institution. The strongest November earthquake in 1940 damaged the gymnasium, but the collapse was partial. The renovation of the building lasted until the summer of 1941. The Second World War finally completed the history of the building of the Second Men's Gymnasium, which was badly damaged in July 1941. After the war, like many other buildings in Chisinau, the gymnasium building was demolished. A local branch of KGB was built in its place. Today, it houses the Information and Security Service of the Republic of Moldova. As for the construction of a house church at an educational institution, the question was raised in 1895 simultaneously with the construction of its own building for the Second Chisinau Male Gymnasium. Initially, the amount of 15,000 rubles was supposed to be used for the construction of an extension to the main building of the gymnasium from the side of the courtyard of a separate small two-story building, in the low building of which there was to be a gymnasium, and in the upper building a house church. But later the original plan was changed. In 1899, the honorary trustee of gymnasium, Konstantin Namysnik, wrote a statement to the construction department about the desire to continue to contribute about 36,000 rubles in order to build a separate church building, and according to his conditions, the temple must be named after the holy and equal to the apostles, kings Constantine and Helena. He also arranged for a family crypt under the floor of the church. On behalf of philanthropist Namysnik, the plans for the construction of the building were prepared by the diocesan architect Mikhail Siratsinsky. As for the activities of this architect, according to archival documents, in 1878, he was appointed diocesan architect of the Chisinau diocese in 1879. For his length of service, he became a collegiate assessor. He was dismissed from his post on September the 27th, 1883, and was retired until October the 8th, 1897, when he was again appointed to the post of architect for the diocesan office on September the 5th, 1905. He was transferred to the court advices. And on October the 4th, 1905, Mikhail Stepanovich Siratsinsky was dismissed from his post due to the fact that by the highest order of September the 3rd, 1905, he was appointed junior architect of the construction department of the Bessarabian Provincial Board. On August the 18th, 1900, the construction committee signed a contract with the executor Stepanov in the amount about 40,000 rubles to complete the construction of the church by November the 1st, 1901. Provincial architect Karl Gasket and diocesan architect Mikhail Siratsinsky carried out technical supervision of the construction of the church. On August the 27th, 1900, in the presence of the honorary trustee Konstantin Namesnik, representative of the construction committee, teaching staff and students of the gymnasium, the foundation of the future Orthodox temple was laid. The author of the iconostasis was Master Kirillov. Artistic works were done by the Ukrainian artist Mishchenko, and all the ordered images were exact copies from the icons of the Saint Vladimir Cathedral in Kiev, executed by the famous artists Vasnetsov, Nesterov, Svidomsky, and others. The bells for the gymnasium's church were made at the Olovashnikov factory in Yaroslavl. For the sacristy and of necessary utensil, all this was purchased at the local church utensil store of Baburova, who donated many, moreover, quite valuable things in memory of her late husband. On May 19th, 1902, the church of the second man gymnasium was solemnly consecrated by His Grace Yakov in the presence of the cathedral clergy, the leadership of educational institutions, local authorities, honorary representatives of the nobility, and many other guests. Reading the Bessarabian provincial news from the 19th of May 1902, the church was built relative to some designs and sketches of the architect Tsiganko. But for today, I haven't found this information in the archival documents yet. According to the shape of the building, the temple is a Greek cross with 4 pillars on which the circular drum of the dome rests. The building is built in the Russian Byzantine style. There is a porch with columns in front of entrance. The first church warden was Konstantin Namesnik, the builder of the gymnasium church, but in 1902-1905, while he was ill, he was replaced by Bessarabian vice governor Ustrugov and the teacher of the second gymnasium, Yakov Baskevich. The pedagogical council elected him to this position immediately after the death of Konstantin Namesnik on November the 5th of 1905. And until autumn of 1919, he served as church warden a total of 14 years. Then, until the spring of 1921, this position was filled by the landowner Tsanko Kilchik, and later by the candidate of law at Moscow University, who initially took an active part in the life of the gymnasium and church. In April 1962, a planetarium was opened of the church building different constellation, observing the planets, eclipse of the sun and moon, listening to lectures on astronomy and astronautics. But a fire in 1990 caused the closing of the church and was subsequently renovated. Today, it is the Orthodox Church of Transfiguration of the Lord as Biserica Schimbarea la Fața a Mântuitorului. and is an architectural monument of national importance. This building is included in the Registry of Historical and Cultural Monuments of the Municipality of Chisinau, representing part of the rich cultural heritage of Moldova. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was interesting, and it's amazing that the histories of old buildings have too much similar. It reminds me the history of gymnasium from my hometown, Kutaisi. The gymnasium were studied a lot of famous Georgian writers, painters, including Vladimir Mayakovsky too.
Our sound isn't working moment. Please, dear colleague, if you have a question.
I have not a question. I just see about the interesting of paper, and that it's remind me the history of building old buildings. So from my hometown, Kutaisi, the old gymnasium where studied Vladimir Mayakovsky with other Georgian famous writers, painters, etc.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dear colleague, o comunicare foarte interesantă în timpurile noastre va fi prezentată de doamna Tamta Turmaniță, doctor în Studiul Artelor, de la Universitatea de Teatru, Film și Rustaveli, de la Universitatea de Stat din Tbilisi, Georgia, cu comunicarea previziuni ale colapsului Uniunii Sovietice în cinematografia georgiană în anii 80. A very interesting paper in our time will be presented by Tamta Turmaniță, PhD, Shota Rustaveli Theater and Film, Georgia State University, Tbilisi, Georgia. The presentation predicting the collapse of the Soviet Union in the Georgian cinema of the 18th.
Thank you very much. I greet the organizers of the conference and all the participants, and wish you good luck. And before I start, I have one request. Can I share my presentation, or you have to make me a host?
You can share.
I can share. Thank you. Okay, just. As my dear colleague said, the title of my presentation is Predicting the Collapse of the Soviet Union in the Georgian Cinema of the 80s. As once Sergei Eisenstein said, an artist must be a prophet. He must feel how history develops, what will happen in this world. These words correspond exactly to the character of Georgian cinema in the first half of the 1980s. Because the films made in that period can be said to have somehow predicted the processes that later developed in the Soviet Union and Georgia. You can show the pictures from 9th of April in 1988, when started Georgian movement for independence. When talking about Georgian cinema of the 80s, the historical context acquires special significance, which largely determined the character and theme of the Georgian films of that time. The 80s are the last decade of Soviet Union's existence, during which the developed processes slowly and purposefully led the country to collapse. The long accumulated economic problems and processes of national self-determination that had developed in almost every republic no longer allowed for the unavoidable and to be postponed. Of course, Georgian cinema could not stay behind these events and processes. Tengiz Abuladzi's film Repentance became a kind of flagship of the Perestroika era. This film was the first to bring to light the previously taboo themes about terror and repression in the Soviet Union. But even in Georgian cinema, before Repentance, there were films that analyzed the historical past and to some extent predicted the future. In 1981, director Irakli Kurikadze made a very interesting movie, The Swimmer. This film, which is a mixture of irony, farce, and tragedy, tells the story of three generations of one family in three different eras, and against the background of their adventure, specific time, trends, and problems are read. Each dynasty member's personality and way of life reflects the time period in which they dwell. The first member of the dynasty at the beginning of the 20th century, Durmish-Khan Dumbadze, living in the seaside city of Batumi, is a child of true nature, strong and flexible, and at the same time a great lover of betting and demonstrating his own strength. When he hears the story of the arrival of Englishman Thomas Winston in the city, who swam across La Manche, decides to break his record and swim twice as far. All alone, he indeed set a new record, but the city did not believe it and laughed at him. Durmish Khan's son, who lives in the late 1940s, is a bit of a foolish. Constantly smiling Domenti really does not look like his father anymore. He has more training, exercise, and regime than natural strength. He is a member of the sports community and an organizer of a mice swim brawl. History seems to be repeating itself. In order to compete with Odissei Mesri, a record breaker who came to the city, Domenti also intends to repeat his father's record. He may have achieved success as a result of intense training, if not envy and denouncement, the usual way of beating a competitor in that period of time. That era prevents him from carrying out the plan. The chubby and inflexible Anton, a member of the third generation of the family, really does not look like an athlete anymore. He cares about the entertainment of the vacationers who come to Batumi and annoys the film crew working on a film about his ancestors with inappropriate advices. In The Swimmer, Irakli Kurikadze used a very interesting method of cinematic narration, cinema in cinema. We, the viewers, simultaneously watch the adventures of the Dumbadze family and at the same time observe the work of the film crew, which makes the film about the Dumbadzes. The editing instruction of the film crew, on the one hand, interestingly wrap up individual novels in a purely cinematic way. On the other hand, they help us to look at the story with the director a little alienated. Some situations and episodes with grief and sadness, and more ironically. Kurikadze's film had a rather difficult fate. As the director himself recalls, the state film committee was dissatisfied with the content of the film, saying that each subsequent generation was presented more weakly and helplessly, and that it was as if the Soviet government was to blame. That is why the film committee issued a decision to deprive Irakli Kurikadze of the title of director and to destroy the film itself. As the director later recalled with a smile, he was hiding the film tape in his grandmother's house in the refrigerator. Later, during the Perestroika era, the film was rehabilitated and screened at several international film festivals, including the Authors Film Festival in Sanremo, where the film won the Grand Prix. In 1984, two films were released. The Prophecy of Eldar Shengelaya's Blue Mountains or Unbelievable Story, and Georgi Shengelaya's The Journey of a Young Composer. In one of them, the calmness before the storm and the painful anticipation of change are felt, while in the other, the metaphorical collapse of the system itself takes place. The action of the journey of a young composer takes place after the suppressed revolution of 1905 in the early 20th century. At first, as if nothing bad would happen, the young man Nikusha Chachanidze intends to go an expedition from village to village and collect samples of folk music. But despite the innocence of this intention, the anticipation of some ambush threat does not leave you throughout the film. Well-known Georgian critic, writer, and publicist Akaki Bakradze, in an article dedicated to Shengelaya's film, calls the situation a coziness full of awful anticipation. The coziness that is illusory is revealed on the very first day of Nikusha's journey. The idyllic pictures of the village is shattered by the sight of a man almost beaten to death by the spring. Almost everywhere he has to go, Nikusha is considered to be the organizer of some kind of conspiracy, and no one believes that he is just a harmless collector of folklore. They talk with hints and expect a call to action from him. Nikusha's circle of shadows is slowly shrinking, almost all in his host home. After he leaves, the punishing team goes and beats people one after one, with each time for severely. Nikusha's temporary hosts are a fear-stricken society that was lost the ability to act on their own and want someone else to take on the role of a savior. It is not accidental that well-known Georgian film critic Gogi Guaharia offers such understanding of this film. In fact, the journey of a young composer as the face of the so-called the era of stagnation, the era of Brezhnev, Andropov, Chernenko. This is the face of ominous coziness, which must be replaced by something important. The stunned, petrified country must be destroyed. The final of the film, where Nikusha's hosts, noble, smart, beautiful, and innocent people are taken to be shot, it proves once again that fear, silence, and the apparent coziness of being locked in your own home cannot save anyone. And if you want to change the reality around you, you have to act on your own and not wait for the mythical savior. The Journey of a Young Composer was awarded a significant international award. The film won the Silver Bear at the Berlin Film Festival. It seems strange how Soviet censorship could have neglected to leave films with similar content. But as Georgi Shengelaya's brother, director Eldar Shengelaya, points out in one interview with Radio Liberty, sometimes censorship won, sometimes we did. We even used to do some tricks. In the case of Georgi Shengelaya's The Journey of a Young Composer, it was a distance in time, the decade that separates the story of the beginning of the 20th century from the events of the same century, from the events in the same area. The tricks mentioned by Shengelaya were mostly metaphorical, allegorical language, which was typical for Georgian cinema of the Soviet period. An allegorical language that gave a variety of interpretations and beyond which it was possible to hide the main message. Another way of telling the truth with impunity was the humor and self-irony characteristic of Georgian cinema. Eldar Shengelaya's film, Blue Mountains or Unbelievable Story, stands out with its satire reaching the grotesque. The action of the film takes place in an editorial office, where actually no one works and everyone just creates the impression of employment. This is where the protagonist of the film, Soso, goes with his novel and begins his endless walk in the rooms of various editors, where no one has time for Soso and his work. Mr. Herodion talks about going on vacation all the time, and instead of manuscripts, eggs are stored in his safe. Mr. Shukri is busy learning French during working hours. Young editors kill time playing chess. The director of the institution himself is constantly lost in banquets and meetings, and during a short run of work, he answers all the questions with "very well." There is one completely amazing character in the film named Givi. He's never at work. Periodically, two muscular men knock on his doors, shouting, "Givi, it's us, Givi." In this editorial office, which is the personification of official indifference, immobility, and bureaucracy, the elevator is symbolically constantly broken. And in this elevator is constantly trapped one of the aged, respected editors, Mr. Vano, who throughout the film desperately tries to drag from his room a huge canvas with the image of Greenland hanging over his desk. This canvas. The action of the film is somehow built on Rondo's principle. It is a movement in a cycle where the main theme is repeated as a refrain, alternating with other non-essential themes. Against the background of the idyllic melody of the famous Georgian composer Gia Gancelli, the seasons of the year alternate behind the windows of the editorial office. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it snows, sometimes the sun shines, and Soso tirelessly asks the novel left by him. When Blue Mountains was released in 1984, most people perceived the film as a satire on official indifference, weakness, and bureaucracy. Moreover, shortly before the film was made, the whole Soviet Union began to fight illness, sometimes quite grotesquely. For example, the police checked the viewers of the daytime film sessions to find the employers who had sneaked out from work. The whole country laughed at the absurd existence of the Blue Mountains editorial office. And the characteristic phrases of the characters in the film became surprisingly popular in the society. But today, the Blue Mountains editorial building is seen as a model of Soviet state system, a state the demolition of which is inevitable, but the people living there fear less of it. Blue Mountains is a film prophecy. The staff of some Tbilisi editorial office is so accustomed to the rhythm of life in prison here. They are so involved in vanity that they do not feel at all the impending catastrophe, the danger of the demolition of the building in which they are bathing. Georgian films made in the 1980s show that Georgian cinema accurately reflected the path that Georgia itself went through during this decade. Moreover, the cinema predicted many events. That is why it is difficult to disagree with Eldar Shingilaya, famous Georgian director, who notes that Georgian cinema gained independence earlier than our country gained the statehood. To finalize, let me show you one episode from a film, Blue Mountains, with melody of Violoncello. It's all. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, dear Tamtam, for your very beautiful illustrated presentation and very interesting. Dear
Thank
colleague, if you have any question, please. Thank you very much, dear
Thank you.
Tamtam. Welcome to our conference, and we are waiting you for next time.
Thank you.
Stimați colegi, următorul vorbitor este din România, dar, din păcate, domnul Marian Tuțui nu se poate conecta la conferința noastră din motive personale și de aceea Comitetul de Organizare a propus să vizionăm o prezentare video a unei colege care este propusă pentru o secțiune, dar noi avem înregistrarea video a comunicării dumneiei, ca să ne încadrăm în timp și până la 11:30 să avem programul plin. Unfortunately, the colleague from Romania, Ms. Marian Tuțui, isn't able to connect to our conference, and we decided to present you another presentation registered for another section. Nu, asta e prezentația domnului Ceastin, asta? Asta e imagine, asta e imagine.
Nu, asta e.
Ok.
Da.
Ok, o secundă.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Ok. O secundă. Așa.
ladies and gentlemen, I'm a public fellow. My name is Rylski.
O secundă, o secundă.
Ce anunțați?
Da. Următorul vorbitor pe care îl propunem este Feodora Burlac, PhD student, Academy of Music, Theater and Fine Arts, with presentation National Chamber Choir History Files, Corul Național de Cameră, File de Istorie. O secundă, cu noi aici un pic sunetul. Posibil?
Republic of Moldova, conducted in the artistic director, Ilona Stefan. The subject of my today's speech is the National Chamber Choir of the Republic of Moldova. The National Chamber Choir was created largely due to some essential transformations that took place in the cultural reality of the Republic of Moldova at the beginning of the 21st century. The changes that have taken place are related to the emergence of the private sector in the sphere of showbiz, the formation of patronage and sponsorship phenomena in the art of music. It is known that in the Republic of Moldova, the first private artistic group was the International Choir, which later passed from its original status to the current one, becoming a state-founded formation, having the status of National Chamber Choir that operates within the public institution organ hall. The purpose of my communication is to review the first historical period of the team, which includes its training stage, tournaments and competitions, repertoire selection, recording of CDs, etc. The Memphis Foundation was established on September 26, 2022, with the aim of conducting philanthropic and sponsorship activities. In a short period of time, the foundation has managed to make itself known in the Republic of Moldova through various activities that support and promote culture, art, science, and sports. Only in 2002, the foundation took a step of historical importance for the culture of our country. It goes from holding separate musical events to setting up, for the first time in Moldova, a private mixed choir. The Memphis Choir was officially established in March 2006, bringing together 34 young artists, students, and graduates of the State University of Art. The first concerts of the group that took place on July 7, 2002, aroused the enthusiasm of the public, a fact reflected in the Memphis Foundation. The special role of the president of the International Group in Moldova, Ibarra, in the appearance of this group deserves to be appreciated. It is his inspired idea to create, for the first time, a professional artistic collective under the umbrella of Memphis. It should be noted that the Memphis company, through its foundation, supports culture not only in the Republic of Moldova, but also in other countries of the world. For example, the country where it was founded, the company funds the Museum of Contemporary Art in Madrid, but the establishment of a chamber choir remains an unprecedented initiative. Ms. Lona Stepan, head of the Academic Choir Conducting Department and director of its choir at the Academy of Music, Education and Fine Arts, was invited as conductor and artist. She gathered around her the best former and current students of choir conducting department. This was the condition of the Ibarra. The members of the choir should be trained and formed specially. Thus, a group of musicians has been soon organized and become the only professional chamber choir in Moldova. The relatively short but very fruitful period of activity in the Memphis Cultural Foundation brought the faith of the choir in the country and abroad. The group promoted professional choral art in the Republic of Moldova, holding concerts in various localities, but also in the capital. Beginning with those times till nowadays, the group promoted professional choral art in the Republic of Moldova, holding concerts in various localities, but also in the capital. Beginning with those times till nowadays, the team takes part in socio-cultural solemnities of national and European significance, but also of local influence. These concerts are most often performed outdoors and are meant to popularize professional art. The programs of the first concerts that took place on July 6 and 7, 2002, in the Organ Hall were composed of the most popular choral works from different eras and geographical areas. Among the most remarkable concerts, we also nominate the Christmas concert inside the Maria Bieshu Opera and Ballet National Theatre, January 11, 2003. The concert dedicated to Women's Day, March 7, 2003, and the vocal symphony concert in collaboration with the Teleradio Moldova Symphony Orchestra, artistic director and first conductor Georgi Rustaveli. On June 2003, inside the Organ Hall. Then the concert at the inauguration of the Catholic Cathedral in Chișinău, October 11, 2003. An important event in the evolution of the group took place on April 25, 2003, when on the occasion of the Holy Celebration of Easter, Requiem for Men's Choir was performed for the first time in Chișinău. It is well known that Ferenc's choral music is not exactly comfortable in vocal interpretation, the composer's creation being based on, in general, on a thinking focus on the principle of instrumentation. Here is what academic professor Valentina Boldurat said. For me, as a professional, its tenure was something divine, because not other choir would have undertaken such a mission. She exposed the creation so sophisticated from the technical point of view, but also with rigorous stylistic requirements. On June 6, 2003, cantata Who Shakes His Feet for soloist choir in the orchestra by Vasily Zagorsky was performed on Folclor by Grigori Vieru with the participation of the National Symphony Orchestra conducted by Georgi Muzică. The presentation of these two large-scale works set an important directions in Union Penosa Choir's activity related to its collaboration with various artistic groups in the country, with the aim of expressing vocal sample creation of great poetry. Another tradition established by Union Penosa Choir was the annual organization of concerts dedicated to the Hispanic Day, in which the creation of Spanish composers were mostly addressed. These are the concerts that took place on October 12, 2002 and 2003. The acquisition of Spanish repertoire of different eras and genres became one of the constant elements of the evolution of Union Penosa Choir. In fact, completed by the organization on June 22, 2004, the choral and entertainment event of Spanish and American music. We will briefly analyze two pieces that belong to Spanish composers. First of them, named A Tu Lado by Javier Busto and Matias Antonmena, was recorded during the live production by Union Penosa Choir during the entertainment program concert in June 2004. His choral nature capitalized on the traditions of Spanish music, both genetically, habanera, and stylistically. It is well known that traditional Spanish music in general and the genre of habanera in particular is distinguished by advanced metrical and rhythmical thinking based on contrast, and sometimes on conflict, overlapping binary and ternary patterns. We can demonstrate this by involving the syncopated rhythm measures 2, 4, 6, and so on, written in the measure of 2 4, where the drawing of a doll to be moved is a quarter used. In this way, the emphasis is on the quick time, creating a typical effect for the rhythm genre. We notice that the given procedure is used, especially at the end of musical phrases. In January 2005, the Union Penosa Cultural Foundation was disbanded, and the choir was left without its official status, without the financial support, without the rehearsal room, and respectively without management. At the same time, thanks to the efforts of the artistic director of the choir, Ms. Ilona Stepan, but also to the enthusiasm and loyalty of the members, the group continued its activity. In May 2005, at the International Festival of Orthodox Music in Hainovka, Poland, the ensemble won the second prize in the category of professional choirs. We draw some conclusions. The short but very critical period of Union Penosa Choir's activities, both nationally and internationally, represents a stage of becoming that led to the artistic and interpretative maturity of the choir. important for its features. A distinctive interpretive style of the collective was formed. The choir has performed internationally, winning several prestigious awards in rural choral competitions. The group contributed to the completion of the musical heritage of the Republic of Moldova by launching 3 CDs, 2 of which are made by the entire choir, including a cappella, choral music, Concierto Coro Union Penosa, and the second one, Choral Entertainment, and the third, performed with the participation of the men's choir group includes Requiem by Ferenc Liszt for men's choir, soloists, and organ. The historical, stylistic directions of the band's repertoire were drawn to classical, romantic, contemporary music. A gaming palette repertoire was established, from the choral miniature to the vocal symphonic genres of poetry, passion, requiem, oratory, song. Choral works signed for different interpretative components were approached. A cappella, with the accompaniment of organ, piano, orchestra, vocal symphony, with the involvement of solists. In terms of extending the limits of academic music, the specifics of the choir can be explained by the and in a broader sense towards the theme of Hispanicity, which is the
urmare, nu deci ceva un pic s-a deconectat și s-a reconectat de nou. Acum anunțăm o pauză până la 12:30. În acest timp avem pregătită pauza de cafea la etajul 1. În continuare, secțiile artelor vor rămâne aici, la bibliotecă, secțiile etnologice, secțiunile 5, 6, 7 le vom desfășura la Institutul Patrimoniului cultural în sălile de la Institut. Secțiile destinate artelor vom continua. Dear colleague, we have an hour break. We are waiting for you at 12:40. conectați când porniți video, porniți camera să fie, da? Așa. Deci,